The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, a crisp, cream-colored envelope standing out amidst the usual barrage of bills and flyers. My wife, Sarah, slid it open with a practiced thumb. Her eyebrows rose, a smile playing on her lips. "Well, look at this," she said, handing it to me. "It's from the Carters. Chloe is getting married." I took the heavy cardstock. Elaborate cursive announced the union of Chloe Marie Carter to Benjamin Robert Sterling. The wedding was to be held in Oakhaven, the small town I'd called home for over a decade before corporate life had pulled Sarah and me to the bustling, anonymous suburbs of a major city. Oakhaven, I murmured, the name conjuring a flood of sensory memories. The scent of cut grass and baking bread from the local patisserie, the sound of screen doors slamming on summer afternoons, the sight of fireflies winking in the vast, velvet darkness that was so absent in our light-polluted sky. "It's in 6 weeks," Sarah noted, peering over my shoulder. "A Saturday. We could make a weekend of it. Visit your mom, your brother. It could be nice." "Nice," I chuckled. "A Carter wedding? With Chloe as the bride? I guarantee it will be anything but boring. And it'll be a full-blown Carter Preston Sterling production. You remember the stories." Sarah's eyes twinkled. She'd only visited Oakhaven a handful of times before my parents passed and my brother, Mark, moved out to the lake cabin. But she'd absorbed the lore of our old neighbors. The practical jokers? The very same. My mind drifted back, past the polished veneer of adulthood, to the chaotic, sun-drenched years living next door to the Carters. Tom and Helen Carter were the bedrock of the neighborhood. Kind, steady, and endlessly patient with the whirlwind that was their 2 children, Liam and Chloe. Liam, 2 years my junior, had been a quiet, observant boy with a thoughtful demeanor. He'd started mowing my lawn when he was 14, a way to earn spending money away from the shadow of his more extroverted sister. Over the years, he'd graduated to helping me with bigger projects, building a deck, painting the fence. During those hours of shared labor, a genuine friendship had formed between the man in his late 20s and the teenager. He was sharp with a dry, understated wit that emerged once he was comfortable. Chloe, the same age as my younger sister, was Liam's polar opposite. All vibrant energy, loud laughter, and a mischievous glint that promised trouble. The sibling rivalry between them was the stuff of local legend. It started innocently enough: whoopee cushions, plastic bugs in beds, switching the salt and sugar. They were partners in crime and each other's primary antagonists. Tom and Helen would just shake their heads, muttering about "payback's a bitch" and letting them sort it out. But as they navigated the treacherous waters of high school, the dynamic shifted. The jokes, once playful, began to carry a sharper edge, a hint of genuine malice, almost always initiated by Chloe. She was popular, a cheerleader, existing in a bright, social sphere that Liam, a solid student and member of the chess club and track team, carefully avoided. It seemed her favorite target for asserting her social dominance was her own brother. I remembered one incident vividly. Liam had a major history presentation, a project he'd worked on for weeks. The morning of, he couldn't find his carefully annotated note cards. After a frantic search, he found them, shredded, in the hamster's cage. He had to wing the entire presentation and got a C. Chloe feigned ignorance, but the smug satisfaction in her eyes was unmistakable. Liam took his punishment, a weekend of extra chores from his parents for losing his work, with a quiet stoicism that broke my heart. He never ratted her out. There was an unspoken code, it seemed, but the balance of power was severely skewed. And then there was the prom. Liam's senior prom was a big deal. He was going with a sweet girl named Rachel from his chemistry class. It was his first real date, and he was uncharacteristically nervous and excited. He'd saved up his money from working for me and bought a sharp navy blue suit. He'd even talked about getting a real haircut, not just my kitchen special with the clippers. The day of the prom, I was out front watering the flower beds when I heard the scream. It wasn't a scream of fright, but of pure, unadulterated horror, tearing from the open bathroom window of the Carter house. A few moments later, the back door slammed open and Liam stumbled out onto their deck. He was in his robe, his face ashen. In his hand, he clutched a mass of what looked like dark, wet straw. Tom Carter came out behind him, his face a mask of concern and confusion. "Son? What in God's name?" Liam just held out his hand. Clumps of his thick, dark hair lay in his palm. Patches of his scalp, angry and red, were visible on his head. "My hair!" he choked out, his voice cracking. It's falling out." The investigation was swift and brutal. The culprit was a bottle of his usual shampoo, laced with a depilatory cream, a hair removal product Chloe had borrowed from Helen's bathroom cabinet. She'd confessed through hysterical, giggling tears, claiming it was just a joke. She thought a little bit might thin it out, make it funny. She hadn't expected the chemical reaction to be so severe. The damage was catastrophic. Liam's hair came out in ragged, ugly patches. There was no salvaging it. With a grim, terrifying resolve that I'd never seen in the boy, he took my clippers, the very ones he joked about avoiding, and in my garage, with me and his father as silent witnesses, he shaved off every last remaining strand. He attended his senior prom completely bald. Rachel, to her credit, stuck by him, but the night was ruined. The photos from that evening were haunting. Liam, in his handsome suit, his scalp pale and vulnerable, a fixed, hollow smile on his face that didn't reach his eyes. Chloe was grounded for a month, but the punishment felt trivial, a mere slap on the wrist for an act that had scarred something deep inside her brother. I moved away a few months later for a promotion. The last image I had of Liam was waving goodbye from his driveway, a baseball cap pulled low over his head, the physical hair growing back, but the wound clearly still fresh. Over the next 9 years, our contact was limited to the digital world. Occasional emails, a text on a birthday or holiday. I knew he'd gone to state college, studied engineering, graduated with honors. He'd landed a good job with a tech firm and, surprisingly, had moved back to Oakhaven, settling into a small house not far from his parents. He was doing well, he assured me. He never mentioned Chloe, and I never asked. The decision was made. We would go. My brother, Mark, a perennial bachelor and fun uncle, was thrilled at the prospect of taking our 2 kids, Emily and Jake, to his lake cabin for a weekend of fishing, hiking, and likely far too much sugar. A wedding without the kids? Sarah had sighed, a dreamy look in her eye. An actual adult party. I get to wear a dress that isn't stain-resistant. As the weeks counted down, my curiosity grew. What was Liam like now? Had the quiet, wounded boy evolved into a confident man? And Chloe, had the cruel teenager matured into a compassionate adult? The Friday of the wedding weekend, we drove the familiar roads to Oakhaven. The town had changed, but its bones were the same. We checked into the local inn, the only one with a "Do Not Disturb" sign that had probably been hanging there since the 90s. My mother, now in a nearby assisted living facility, was overjoyed to see us, her memory of the present flickering but her recall of the past, of the Carters sharp and clear. "Oh, the Carters," she'd exclaimed. "Is little Chloe really getting married? She was such a lively thing. And Liam, such a sweet boy. He still comes to visit me, you know. Brings me those hard candies I like." That was Liam. Steady, kind, remembering the small things. Later that afternoon, we dropped the kids off with a hyper-enthusiastic Mark at the cabin, then decided to take a stroll past our old house and the Carter place. Our former home was painted a different color, but the Carter house looked exactly the same, right down to the tire swing hanging from the massive oak tree in the front yard. And there, in the driveway, washing his sensible sedan, was Liam. He was no longer a boy. He'd filled out, the lanky frame now solid and strong. He had a close-cropped beard that suited him, and his hair was thick and full, showing no evidence of the prom night trauma. But his eyes were the same, intelligent, watchful. "Well, I'll be damned. Alex?" he called out, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Liam, look at you." We shook hands, then pulled into a brief, backslapping hug. "You remember Sarah?" "Of course. Good to see you both." His demeanor was easy, confident. This was a man comfortable in his own skin. We made small talk for a few minutes, the drive, the town, my mom. He asked about the kids by name. He was engaged, present. It was only when the subject of the wedding came up that a subtle shift occurred. A veil, almost imperceptible, seemed to drop over his eyes. "Big day tomorrow," I said. "Is Chloe around? We'd love to say hello." "She's holed up at the Sterling family's estate," Liam said, his tone neutral. "The bride's pre-wedding retreat. No mere mortals allowed. It's a whole production." He rinsed a sponge in his bucket. "The rehearsal dinner is tonight at the Oak Room. You should come. It's open to out-of-towners. Mom and Dad would love to see you." "We wouldn't want to intrude," Sarah said politely. "Nonsense," Liam replied, his smile returning, though it didn't seem to fully reach his eyes this time. "Trust me, with this crowd, 2 more faces in the sea of pastel and polyester won't even be noticed." We agreed to go. As we walked back to the inn, Sarah looped her arm through mine. "He seems great," she said. "Really settled." "He does," I agreed, but a small, nagging feeling tugged at me. There was something in his calmness, a stillness that felt deliberate, like the quiet at the center of a storm. The rehearsal dinner was a lavish affair, a clear indicator of the financial might of the Carter, Preston, Chloe's mother's family, and Sterling clans. The Oak Room, the town's fanciest restaurant, was decked out in twinkling lights and floral arrangements that probably cost more than my first car. Tom and Helen Carter spotted us immediately. Tom, a little grayer, a little thicker around the middle, enveloped me in a bear hug. Helen, still elegant and sharp-eyed, kissed our cheeks. "Alex, Sarah, it's so wonderful you came," Helen gushed. "Chloe will be so sorry she missed you tonight." We took our seats at a table near the back, perfect for observing the spectacle. The groom, Benjamin Sterling, was a handsome, affable man with a firm handshake and a dazzling smile that seemed professionally calibrated. He was a partner in his family's commercial real estate firm. He was perfect, and he and Chloe looked perfect together, a fact showcased in a dizzying slideshow projected onto a large screen. Then the bride made her entrance. Chloe Carter, now Chloe Sterling to be, was radiant. She wore a stunning ivory cocktail dress, her smile blazing. Her hair was a masterpiece of honey blonde highlights and intricate styling, clearly the result of months of careful cultivation. She moved through the room like a queen holding court, air-kissing, laughing, commanding attention. She was every bit the lively thing my mother remembered, but polished to a high gloss. She finally made her way to our table. "Alex, oh my God, you look exactly the same," she trilled, pulling me into a cloud of expensive perfume. "And this must be Sarah. Liam said you were in town. I'm so glad you could come to my big day." She was charming, effervescent, but watching her interact with Liam, who was standing quietly by the bar, was revealing. She'd flit over to him, adjust his tie with a condescending pat, say something that made her laugh but only elicited a tight, patient smile from him. It was a dynamic I recognized, the performative affection of a sibling who still sees the other as a supporting character in her own story. During the speeches, Benjamin's father droned on about legacy and merger. Chloe's maid of honor, a woman named Brittany whose voice was several octaves too high, told embarrassing childhood stories that mostly revolved around Chloe getting her way. Then it was Liam's turn, as the brother of the bride. He stood, glass in hand, and walked to the front of the room. He looked out over the crowd, his expression unreadable. The room quieted. "Chloe," he began, his voice calm and clear. "We've shared a lot over the years. A room, a car, parents, and a particularly strong sense of humor." A polite chuckle rippled through the audience. Liam's lips curved into a small, private smile. "We've played more than our fair share of pranks on each other, some more memorable than others." He paused, his eyes meeting Chloe's across the room. Her smile was fixed, but I saw a flicker of something uncertain in her eyes. "They say revenge is a dish best served cold, and I've learned that patience is, indeed, a virtue." He raised his glass. "To my sister, Chloe, may your marriage be as happy and as full of surprises as our childhood was." Cheers. It was a perfect speech. To most, it was a witty, brotherly tease. But to me, to Sarah, and I suspect to Tom and Helen, it carried a different weight. It was laced with a subtext so thick you could cut it with a knife. The words revenge and cold and patience hung in the air long after the toast was done. Chloe's laugh was a little too loud as she shouted, "Love you, big brother." But her eyes narrowed just slightly. Later, as the party was winding down, I found Liam by the bar, sipping a glass of whiskey. "Neat. Interesting speech," I commented lightly. He looked at me, and for a fleeting second, the calm facade dropped, and I saw the raw 19-year-old boy in my garage, holding the clippers with white-knuckled intensity. Then it was gone. "Just telling the truth, Alex," he said, his voice quiet. "Some debts take a long time to settle, but they always get settled." He clinked his glass against mine and walked away, leaving me with a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The morning of the wedding, Sarah and I enjoyed a leisurely breakfast at the inn. The ceremony wasn't until 4 p.m., giving us the whole morning to relax. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. A perfect day for a wedding. At 11:17 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text message from Tom Carter. My brow furrowed. Why would Tom be texting me today of all days? I opened the message. It was brief and utterly baffling. "Hi Alex. A bit of a change of plans. The wedding ceremony has been cancelled. However, the reception will go on as scheduled at the country club at 6 p.m. Please still come. Think of it as a party. Hope to see you there." Sarah read it over my shoulder. What does that mean? Cancelled? How can a wedding be cancelled the day of? We stared at the phone, our minds racing through the possibilities. Cold feet? A family emergency? Had Benjamin been in an accident? Maybe it's a typo? Sarah ventured, hopelessly. I called Tom's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Helen's. Same thing. Liam didn't pick up either. "Well," I said, setting the phone down, "I guess we'll find out at 6. The hours dragged by, fueled by rampant speculation. By 5:30 p.m. we were dressed and no closer to an answer. The air of confusion was palpable as we pulled into the impeccably manicured grounds of the Oak Haven Country Club. Valets were still taking cars. A band was setting up on a stage inside the grand reception hall. The vast room was a vision of opulent, blush pink and gold decor, with a dance floor the size of my backyard and tables groaning under crystal centerpieces. It was a reception fit for a princess. But there was no princess. And there was no wedding party lineup, no sweetheart table. Instead, Tom and Helen Carter were standing near the entrance, greeting guests with strained but determined smiles. They were dressed in their formal wedding attire, but Helen's eyes were puffy and red-rimmed. "Tom, Helen?" I said, shaking Tom's hand. "What's going on? Is everything all right?" Tom let out a long, weary sigh. "It's complicated, Alex. The wedding is off. Chloe decided she can't go through with it." "My God," Sarah gasped. "Is she okay?" "She's physically fine," Helen said, her voice tight. "She's at home. Something happened. She's refusing to be seen." Before I could ask what something was, my eyes scanned the room and landed on a figure standing calmly by the bar, a bottle of beer in his hand. It was Liam. He was watching the scene with an expression of profound, unshakable calm. He met my gaze and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. And in that moment I knew. The speech, the words about cold revenge and patience. The debt. It had been settled. The story began to percolate through the crowd in hushed, excited whispers. It came in fragments passed from aunt to cousin, from old family friend to +1. Found clumps of it on her pillow. Screamed so loud the neighbors called the police. Looks like a mangy dog. Something in her shampoo. The full picture clicked into place with horrifying, brilliant clarity. Hair removal cream. Liam had waited 9 years, biding his time, letting the wound fester and the desire for retribution mature. He hadn't sought just any revenge. He'd waited for the perfect moment, the moment of her greatest vanity, her most public display. Her wedding day. He had used the exact same weapon she had used on him, creating a perfect, brutal symmetry. I made my way through the crowd to the bar, where Liam was now nursing his beer, a solitary island of serenity in a sea of chaotic gossip. Liam, I said, my voice low. Alex, he replied, turning to face me. His eyes were clear and untroubled. Did you? I couldn't even finish the sentence. I did, he said, without a hint of shame or triumph. Just a simple statement of fact. Last night, after the rehearsal dinner, I snuck into the Sterling's guest house where she was staying. It was surprisingly easy. Swapped out her fancy $100-a-bottle shampoo for an identical one, premixed. My God, man, I breathed. The wedding was the point, he finished calmly. The prom was one of the most important nights of my life at the time. She ruined it. This was one of the most important days of her life. It seemed proportional. Just then, Tom and Helen joined us. Tom's face was a storm of conflicting emotions. Anger, disappointment, but also a grim understanding. Liam, for God's sake. Tom began, running a hand through his hair. What were you thinking? I was thinking about prom, Dad, Liam said, his voice still even. I was thinking about standing in Alex's garage, shaving my head because my own sister had chemically burned my scalp. I was thinking about everyone laughing at me. I was thinking about how you grounded her for a month, and that was that. No real apology. No real consequence. It was just another Chloe being Chloe moment. Helen flinched as if struck. Liam, that's not fair. We were furious with her. Were you? Liam asked, turning his gaze to his mother. Because it always felt like you were just waiting for the storm to pass. You never made her understand the cruelty of it. You never made her feel the shame I felt. This she will understand. You've humiliated her. You've ruined her wedding. Tom's voice rose, attracting a few glances. She humiliated me, Liam countered, his own voice gaining a sharp edge for the first time. She ruined my prom. The scale is different, but the act is the same. You taught us that actions have consequences. For years, mine did. Hers never seemed to, until today. He looked at his parents, his jaw set. You are both here, at the party. You canceled the wedding, but you're still throwing the party. What does that tell you? It was a devastating point. Tom and Helen looked at each other, the truth of his words sinking in. They had, on some level, chosen. They were disappointed in Liam's actions, but they were here, hosting the reception. They hadn't shut down the whole event, hadn't rushed to their daughter's side to the exclusion of all else. They were maintaining a facade of normalcy because, deep down, a part of them knew the scales had been balanced. What she did to you was horrible, son, Tom said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. We know that. We've always known that. But this was nuclear. It was a precision strike, Dad, Liam corrected softly. 9 years in the making. I didn't hurt her. I didn't damage anything that won't grow back. I just gave her a taste of her own medicine, on a day when it would truly matter. He finished his beer and set the bottle on the bar with a definitive click. I'm not sorry. I'll pay for my portion of the canceled wedding. Every last cent. It was worth it. He walked away, leaving his parents and me standing in stunned silence. With the initial shock wearing off, the reception slowly transformed into one of the most surreal and fascinating parties I have ever attended. The absence of the bride and groom created a strange, liberated atmosphere. There was no schedule, no first dance, no cake cutting. It was just a few hundred people, a fantastic band, and an open bar, all united by an incredible piece of shared gossip. Sarah found me, her eyes wide. You heard? It's true. Liam did it. Hair removal cream, just like she did to him. I know, I said. I just talked to him. It's terrible, she said, though a small, incredulous laugh escaped her lips. It's absolutely morally questionable, and yet, my God, the audacity, the patience. It's the coldest, most calculated thing I've ever heard. We found ourselves at a table with a few other old neighbors and friends who remembered the Carters well. The story of the prom night was retold. now with a new, dramatic conclusion. "I always liked Liam," said Mrs. Gable, who had lived 3 doors down. "Quiet but tough as nails. Chloe was a spoiled little thing. Always got away with murder. Helen doted on her." "Do you think the wedding is off for good?" someone else asked. "Who knows?" another replied. "Benjamin seemed pretty shell-shocked when he left. But the family paid for all this. Might as well enjoy it." And enjoy it we did. The band, having been paid, played with joyous abandon. People danced with an energy that is usually reserved for the last hour of a reception. Not the first. The caterers, following their original plan, brought out the exquisite food, filet mignon, seared sea bass, an enormous tower of cupcakes in lieu of a traditional cake. It was a party fueled by exquisite schadenfreude and the sheer, irresistible drama of it all. People weren't malicious, but there was a universal acknowledgement that the brother, the quiet one, the one who had been wronged, had finally, spectacularly, evened the score. Liam circulated through the crowd. He didn't hide. He answered questions with a quiet candor that was both disarming and formidable. "Yes, I did it. No, I'm not sorry. Yes, it was about the prom. Yes, I'd do it again." His lack of remorse was more powerful than any gloating could have been. It was a statement of pure, unvarnished fact. This is justice. Tom and Helen eventually relaxed, a glass of champagne in their hands. The weight of the situation was still there, but the party atmosphere was infectious. They even shared a slow dance on the crowded floor, a poignant picture of a parent's love surviving even the most extreme of their children's wars. Later in the evening, I found Liam on the terrace, looking out over the golf course, bathed in the light of a rising moon. "Quite a night," I said, leaning on the railing beside him. "It is," he agreed. He finally seemed to be feeling the emotional release of the day. The rigid control had softened into a quiet exhaustion. "Why now?" I asked. "You had years. You lived near her. Why her wedding day?" He was silent for a long moment. "After prom, something broke in me, Alex. The trust was gone. Not just for her, but for the whole concept of fairness. I realized that if you want justice, you often have to make it yourself. I knew I would get her back, but it couldn't be a small thing. It had to be something that would truly make her understand the feeling of having your moment stolen, of being a laughingstock." He picked at the label of his beer bottle. "I watched her plan this wedding for over a year. It was all she talked about. The dress, the flowers, the hair. Especially the hair. She spent thousands on it. It was her crown. And I realized that was it. I had to take the crown. I had to show her what it felt like to stand at the center of your own universe and have it suddenly, publicly, collapse because of a cruel, childish joke." "Do you think she gets it now?" I asked. "I think," he said slowly, "for the first time in her life, she is feeling a consequence that isn't easily brushed aside. She can't charm her way out of this. She can't laugh it off. She has to sit in it, just like I did." He looked at me, and the ghost of that 19-year-old boy was back in his eyes. "It wasn't about ruining her life, Alex. It was about making us even. And we are now. For the first time since we were kids, we're even." We stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the band play a rocking cover of a classic song, the cheers of the party spilling out from the hall behind us. "So, what happens on Monday?" I asked. Liam smiled, a real, genuine smile this time. "On Monday, I go back to work. I call my fiancée, who thinks I'm a lunatic but loves me anyway. And I wait. The hair will grow back. The wedding might even happen eventually. But things will be different between Chloe and me from now on. They'll have to be. The war is over." The party finally wound down around midnight. Sarah and I said our goodbyes to Tom and Helen, promising to visit before we left town. We hugged Liam, a wordless communication passing between us. A mix of awe, concern, and a strange sense of closure. The drive back to the inn was filled with a decompressing silence, finally broken by Sarah. "I can't decide if he's a monster or a folk hero," she admitted, staring out the window. "I don't think he's either," I said. He's just a man who decided that a 9-year-old debt needed to be paid in full. There's a brutal logic to it that's hard to argue with. Do you think the family will recover? The Carters? They're resilient. This will be the family story for generations. The legend of the canceled wedding and the bald bride. It'll be told at Thanksgiving, probably with Liam and Chloe eventually laughing about it. Or at least tolerating it. The next morning, we picked up our slightly sunburned and very happy children from Mark's cabin. He was bursting with curiosity. So, Spill, the whole town is buzzing. Did the bride really get a case of sudden baldness? We gave him the abridged version, which still left him slack-jawed. Liam Carter? He kept repeating. Quiet Liam? That's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard. I'm gonna send him a fruit basket. Before leaving Oakhaven, we stopped by my mother's to say goodbye. She was having a good day, lucid and bright. How was the wedding, dear? She asked. It was eventful, Mom, I said, kissing her cheek. The ceremony was canceled, but the party was great. Oh, that's a shame, she clucked. Well, that Chloe was always a handful. And that Liam, such a nice boy. He brought me more candies this morning. My head snapped up. He was here? This morning? Oh yes, just for a minute. He said he had a busy night and needed a dose of quiet. We talked about the weather. I had to smile. Even in the tumultuous aftermath of his epic revenge, he'd kept his routine. He'd visited my mother. The steadiness of his character, the essential goodness of him, hadn't been erased by his act of vengeance. It had just been channeled. As we drove out of Oakhaven, the town receding in the rearview mirror, I felt a sense of completion. We had gone back for a wedding and had found something far more compelling. The end of a long-running story, a saga of sibling rivalry that had reached its Shakespearean conclusion. Epilogue. About 3 months later, I received an email from Liam. It was a photo. It showed him and Chloe, sitting on the deck of their parents' house. Chloe was wearing a stylish silk scarf wrapped around her head. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't scowling either. She was leaning against her brother's shoulder, and his arm was around her. They both looked tired but peaceful. The email's subject line was simple, truce. The body of the text read, Alex, hope you and the family are well. Just wanted to send you an update. It's been a long few months. Chloe didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. Benjamin stood by her, to his credit. The wedding is back on, tentatively scheduled for next fall. We started talking again after Mom had a minor health scare. Puts things in perspective. We had it out. Screaming, crying, the whole thing. I told her everything I'd felt for the past 9 years. And for the first time, I think she actually listened. She apologized. A real, no-excuses apology for the prom. And I apologized for the wedding. It's not perfect. It might never be. The trust will take years to rebuild, if it ever fully does. But the war is over. We're calling it the Great Hair Ceasefire. Thanks for being there. Say hi to Sarah. Liam. I showed the email to Sarah. She read it and smiled. The scales are balanced, she said. And they were. It wasn't a neat Hollywood ending. It was messy, complicated, and deeply human. A brother and a sister, bound by blood and a history of conflict, had finally navigated their way to a painful, hard-won peace. And it had all started and ended with a bottle of shampoo. The story of the canceled wedding became a part of Oakhaven's local lore, a tale told with a wink and a shake of the head about the Carter kids and the day that justice, cold and patient, was finally served. And for my family, it became the benchmark for all future acts of revenge. A reminder that while getting even might be a dish best served cold, the aftermath is often where the real story begins.